Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Meaningful Speech live Q and A, all about AAC and gestalt language processing. I am Alexandria Zachos from Meaningful Speech, and today we have Laura Hayes with us, who wrote the majority of our AAC+GLP course. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, everybody.
Laura's actually in her hotel room in Orlando, Florida, because she spoke this morning at the ATIA conference. Do you want to tell everyone what that is, Laura?
Yeah, so it's the Assistive Technology Industry Association, and so it's related to all assistive technology, including AAC. And it's just a wonderful conference with so many unique minds and new innovative products, and it's just a really great place to be and present. So I had the opportunity to present with Kate Flaxman and Kate McLaughlin today on AAC and GLP.
Awesome. Well, Laura's a real trooper because this is a very long day for her, presenting at a conference all day and getting on to do this. Before we get started, I wanted to tell everyone that Laura and I actually did a AAC+GLP Q and A in the fall for our members only, those that are in the original Meaningful Speech course, but we do have that available on our YouTube channel. So if your question does not get answered today, please check that video out on our YouTube channel, because what we're trying to do today is get to things we didn't answer then and kind of just cover a whole lot of ground. So again, if your question doesn't get answered today, go check that video out. But if you do have a question, please post it in the chat, because we're going to leave some time at the end for Laura and I to answer some of those chat questions. The questions that we're going to answer right now are the ones that were submitted through that Google Doc form that you all filled out in order to be at this live Zoom today. So I just want to start right off and have Laura tell us a little bit about herself, and then a little bit about why she and I created this course and what it's all about.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me back. And I always introduce myself by saying that I am a speech pathologist. I feel like I grew up and was meant to be a speech pathologist because I have a sister with a disability. She has complex communication needs. And so often I found myself in the role of being her support person, naturally being her communication partner, sometimes interpreting for her. We're very, very close to this day. She's 3 years older than me, so she does have some age on me, but she's just wonderful. And so she started kind of my path on this journey of trying to give someone a voice. And so became an SLP, wanted to work in the hospital setting, took a journey through that, and just started to find myself really passionate about working with autistic children. That naturally led into learning about AAC, knowing that a huge percentage of them have complex communication needs that can't be met through natural spoken words. And so then I made that transition to the AAC team there. Never say never, because I thought I would never work at a school, and an opportunity popped up. And so now I'm an AAC facilitator for a large metropolitan school district. And I just feel like a huge part of my caseload and the support that I provide in training is for autistic students. And again, I think when you asked kind of how we met, Alex, so I do a podcast there, but I also was doing some presentations on AAC and stimming, and gestalt language processing kind of fell into that because oftentimes when we script, people call it stimming. So then I dove down this GLP rabbit hole, discovered you, we met, we got to chat, and I think the rest is kind of history. We just kept working together and talking about this idea of GLP and how it could be applied to AAC users. And then knowing that there's so many nuances of AAC softwares, how do we take what we know about gestalt language development and gestalt language processors and apply that to systems that were created for analytic language processors?
Yeah, I found that the entire journey I've had from creating my social media, Instagram, to creating my course, to getting to know all of you, the number one question that I was getting was, well, what does this mean for AAC users? So I kind of had it in the back of my mind that, okay, this is going to have to be the next course. And Laura, we've addressed this on social media, but a lot of people are wondering this, and we talked about it in our last video, so I'm going to bring it up again. Why are we writing, or why have we written this entire course when we don't really have peer-reviewed research on AAC and Gestalt language processing?
It's a great question, and anybody who knows me knows I'm a data girl. So I like numbers, I like internal and external evidence, and we know that that is important for making our clinical decisions. But we also know that a large amount of AAC users are getting stuck. They're getting stuck and they're not able to get to that flexible language, that spontaneous language that we want to see, that we want for their autonomy, for their ability to talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime. And so when we think about the impact of not putting something out there and waiting until we have that research that we know is coming, but we don't know when it's coming, that's really hard to swallow. We know it could be costing time, language, opportunities, and we do have internal evidence. We are seeing success when we make these customizations and we try it with AAC users, and we see that success. We see almost immediate success in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for all of that. I'm going to move on to our questions now. I know some people are already putting some questions in the chat, so I want to give us enough time to get to everything. So let's start with, where do we get started if we have a child who is non-speaking or minimally speaking? And let's add on to that, how do we know that a child is a Gestalt language processor if they are non-speaking or minimally speaking?
Well, that's the first thing, right? We need to decide, are they an analytic language processor or a Gestalt language processor? Because that is going to shift how we are going to support them in therapy as well as on an AAC device. So one of the things we'll talk about in the course is we're going to give handouts to support how we get intake for our assessments. That, if you're at a school, that could be done at any time, but if you're out in the clinic setting, or if you're in private practice, or if you're just a family member thinking about, well, what would I bring to an assessment? Like, that's all kind of gathered and given to you in the handouts in the course, because we know that history is a huge piece of this. How are they using language, or how would others describe that they're using language? Or unaided communication, so their body language, their eye gaze, their facial expressions, universal behaviors, anything like that. How are they using communication for language or for communication? Sometimes we think they aren't using language, but they're actually humming or using jargon that has rich sound streams to it that can support our understanding that they are likely a Gestalt language processor. I know Alex you've had a lot of resources too on just, when in doubt, if they are autistic, they're likely a Gestalt language processor. But really, if you're determining, are they a Gestalt language processor? Other things would be, like I said, the rich intonation, the humming, or the melody, the music, or just getting stuck. If they're getting stuck with those analytic language strategies, if they're stuck in single word town, they are likely not moving forward because it's not their language processing style. When we're doing a good job and supporting their language processing style, they will likely be able to make those connections on their own, and we won't have to work as hard. The last thing is, how are they using media? How are they creatively communicating? Are they, if they're using YouTube media clips and rewinding little spots, or if they're doing that with songs. I showed a video today of an individual who really hones in on map locations and coordinates, and that is a way to talk about an area. So how are they communicating? It all goes back to the how.
Mm-hmm. And somebody chimed in here on the chat and said, sometimes giving them free access is very telling.
And that's hard. That's really hard because traditionally, you know, I don't know how many people here are trained in AAC, but a thing that has been preached for a long time, especially since 2011 and the birth of the iPad, is it's like, it's their voice, lock it in until they understand it's their voice. Do not give them access to other things, because giving them access to other things might make them think that it's a form of entertainment. And then they won't use the AAC app. They'll be drawn to other things. But what we're finding, at least for gestalt language processors, is that they need that access. They need a array of ways to show us that they can communicate. It's always individualized, but that's just something to think about.
Yeah. And if we don't give that free access, we might not know, oh, hey, they are communicating something with these certain YouTube videos, if it's just locked down and not allowed. Okay. All right. So moving on here, how do we determine when to start with AAC?
Great question. So two things I always tell someone who's maybe wavering, like, should we start AAC or should we just keep working on these language strategies by themselves? One, we all use forms of AAC. We all do. We all write, we all text. I'm sure you have all used some form of AAC today. So AAC doesn't need to be daunting. I just went to a presentation talking about how we can use it more as an educational tier 1 support and a model that we can just incorporate into supports that are already there. It can be inclusive. It doesn't need to be a thing that we gatekeep and say, now you have AAC. It's part of mainstream media. You can get it any family member could get it today on an iPad. They grab an iPad, grab an app, and get started. So it's accessible. We don't need to gatekeep. It's available for them. We all use it. It's mainstream. So it shouldn't be this scary, daunting thing that we say, okay, now we can, it's a last resort. Now we can go to it. The other thing is that, and this is sometimes a misnomer, but research shows AAC does not inhibit speech development, and in some cases can actually support it or increase it. So when we consider exploring AAC, we know it can take time, and it's a marathon process, right? This is not a sprint. We know it's going to take time to learn the language. We know it's going to take time to customize for our GLPs. So in general, if you're asking the question, would they benefit from AAC? My answer is, you've already kind of answered your own question. Probably yes, right? If we all use it, we know it supports literacy, we know it supports language development, it's probably not going to hurt to try it. The ways that, if you're still like on the edge and you're like, I'm not sure, things to ask yourself. Are they, if they're not developing spoken language, despite those natural language models that you're using in this case would be natural language acquisition or those positive gestalt language strategies, if they are using spoken words, but those spoken words are not intelligible or easily understood by both familiar and unfamiliar communication partners, that's key, right? If there's still signs of frustration that are being exhibited, if there's signs of unrepaired communication breakdown, and that can result in frustration, or it can also just result in lack of social connection or shutdown where they're not communicating, both of which are not ideal. And then they're not able to get to that spontaneous self-generated language. And that can be consistently or intermittently. And that's key because that is what we are hearing from a lot of autistic adult AAC users or part-time AAC users, is that depending upon their environment, they may need AAC in specific situations and environments. And then the last is just if they really benefit from those learning models through visuals and auditory output.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've talked about that quite a bit, listening to adults and autistic adults in the autistic community. And I think it's just been such a running myth in our field that, you know, speaking people might not need AAC or might not need access to it. And I think we're finding, especially with our GLPs, that even when they get to flexible original language, there may be situations that arise where they go back to their stage 1 gestalts. So dysregulation, something really emotional is happening, different situations where they might benefit from having access to AAC because they can't access that original flexible language in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And really I always say it's their voice, so it's their choice. You know, I'm not going to
like
gatekeep that.
All right, let's move on to best AAC apps. I think this reel got a lot of love and a lot of questions when we posted it last week on Instagram. So let's address this and why we even use the word best.
Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. Let's unpack it because you and I went back and forth a lot on this when we even considered making the reel, for the very reasons that people commented, in the sense that, well, I don't have the best. I don't have the best. Well, when we say best, there were specific features that we included in looking at what we know can support Gestalt language processors. So things like recorded audio, recorded video, whiteboard features, robust language that can be backed up, that has good tech support that anybody can have available to them. And so those were kind of our criteria. The ones that were better had some of those, and the ones that were good had some of those, but not quite as many. And so that was kind of what we looked at. However, I've used all of those with success for Gestalt language processors. And it truly comes down to a feature match. How are we feature matching? That's best practice in the world of AAC, is how are we feature matching for the individual that comes to us and says, I need an AAC software, I need an AAC system. We need to use a feature matching approach to support them and support their journey. Even on that post, someone had replied and said, well, have you seen this one? It's completely free. Yes, I have. You can't back it up. It's critical to be able to back up a system for a Gestalt language processor, knowing we have to customize it, knowing that it's not if, it's when something's going to break, right? I have had so many SLPs and families in tears. I shouldn't say so many because I'm pretty good at telling people to back it up, but I've had some in tears because they've lost all their changes. I had one where they had it for 6 years and I said, where's your backup? So it has to be something that we can back up. That's critical. But then when you think about language organization and dual language learners, not every app is going to support that. So something that might be best for one AAC user is going to be out the window. It's going to be a terrible option if they don't have the language that they need, or if that's not how if it's they're a kid that has great motor planning, or if they have an understanding of categories, or they don't have an understanding of categories. Language organizations are set up differently. And so we're going to go way into more detail in the course with that. And that's really kind of why I felt strongly that we needed bonus modules for the different apps and language organizations, because the customization is so different based off of the software and the language organization you have in front of you.
Yeah, talk to us about what is in these bonus modules and what AAC apps we cover.
Okay, hopefully I don't miss any. Let me know if I miss any, Alex. But we have Speak for Yourself, Proloquo to Go, Proloquo for Text. We have Touch Chat with Word Power. We have Pod, and we have Lamports for Life. Am I missing any?
No, I think you said everything.
Okay.
Did you say Touch Chat or did I?
Touch Chat with Word Power.
Okay. Why did we not talk about like Android apps like Cough Drop and Avaz? Or why did we not talk about Grid? Why did we not talk about that free one that people were mentioning on the reel we posted?
Yeah, so right now, and I'm going to say right now because technology is ever changing, and I won't name names, but at least one of those software developers reached out to me and has some really new exciting things that they are working on in the back behind the scenes that I think will be really amazing for Gestalt language processors if it comes to fruition. So software and AAC designs are always changing. I just told Alex there's the new Snap Motor Planning page set, which everyone is very excited about. Lots of head nods. So those things will be updated as they come. But for right now, in the US, those are not as well supported as the ones that we did the bonus modules on. That is not to say that they are not well supported everywhere, but these are the ones that we know are very well supported here, have the training, have the tech support, have the ability to have those features that we mentioned earlier. So that's where we started. That's not to say that those are not good apps or that we can't have those, or that that's not the right app for an AAC user, completely individualized. And it's also not to say that we may not have a bonus module in the future.
Right. So one thing Laura and I were kind of clear on is this is such a new topic that's ever evolving. So if this is something you choose to invest in and decide to learn in, it is something that we will be continuously updating. Maybe not every month, but like as new information comes forward, we are going to be adding it to the course. And we did forget Snap. I think people are commenting in the chat. And I said, yes, we have Snap, we have LAMP. That's, yeah. So, and if you want to see a full list, you can go to meaningfulspeech.com/AAC-course, or just go to the main page and click on AAC course, and you'll see a whole breakdown on all of the modules and all of the bonus modules. In fact, why don't you just go into that right now, Laura? What are the core modules? What are we covering?
Sorry, I got distracted by Tiffany's adorable dog that she has got on here. He is adorable. No, keep him on. It's great. So I did want to add one thing. So for those ones that we mentioned, like Avaz and some other ones like Dialogue AAC, ones that we know are pretty good, Grid, we do talk about them in the main course. So let's dive into what that looks like a little bit, because we have we have 4 main, I guess technically 5 main modules, because one's an overview of the entire course. And then we have an AAC overview where we're going to talk about what we know about AAC, what are best practices and what the research tells us, and what those strategies, what does good AAC look like for communication partners, and what strategies overlap with what we know are good GLP strategies to support our gestalt language processors. So that's all in the AAC overview. Then we have your module, Alex, ALP versus GLP. Did you want to give a brief overview of that?
Yeah, so I think about half of you that are with us today have taken my original course. And if you have not, it is not a prerequisite. So what I did in this course is I did a module kind of covering the basics of gestalt language development. And I share some of the main, most important handouts from the original course. Laura, you're frozen. Are you still with us? Oh man. Okay. She's on hotel Wi-Fi, so hopefully she can get back on. So I share like basically everything you're going to need to know about gestalt language development in order to be successful with any GLPs that need AAC or are currently using AAC. I think this course is kind of perfect for people that are working with minimally to non-speaking individuals that are, I'm just going to ask everyone to mute. Here we go. Minimally speaking and non-speaking individuals that are eligible for AAC or currently using AAC, this is like the perfect course for you. If you're an SLP or parent that is working with a child that is speaking, who still may benefit from AAC, but there's a lot more verbal speech, you are going to want to look into my original course. That will be very helpful for you. So somebody here in the chat, I'm waiting kind of for Laura to get back in here. Says she's on here, but I'm not sure what's going on with her Wi-Fi. So let me take a couple questions from the chat. So someone asked, I'm on the wait list for the course. How do we find out? So the wait list is actually just those that are waiting. So I could send you special emails and the special discount code. However, you're not on some list where you're not going to get into the course. Everybody gets in. So it's going to open tonight at midnight. We have capacity for thousands of people. So you are not just going to be waiting. And you can log into the website, meaningfulspeech.com tonight at midnight, tomorrow, anytime, and you can purchase the course. It will be $50 off with the code AAC50, which you will all get an email about from me. And Laura is back. Laura, can you say something?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Yay. Welcome back.
Thanks. Well, I kind of was hoping that it was good timing and that maybe you guys got to talk about your modules, because I just saw a comment come in. Yes, the first two modules may be a little bit of overview for some of you. However, the next two shouldn't be, or should have a lot more content. And so let me just put this out there. If you're like, oh, I'm not sure, maybe this is just review. The last module, the therapy module, I think, what was it, Alex? I did it and I thought it was going to be about 2 hours, and I think I was closer to 3. Mm-hmm. So that therapy module where we walk through, what does customizations look like? What does therapy look like? That's 3 hours long. I am a quick speaker. So if that gives you any indication, there is a lot that we cover in that module alone. And I personally think the handouts alone would make me want the course, because they're so helpful on the journey of how to assess. How do we take language samples for AAC systems? How do we take unaided communication samples? What do we look at for sensory? What do we look at for media? What does that all look like? How do we determine what features are good features for AAC systems? So all that's kind of packaged in there, and we talk about it. And then additionally, I mean, I know they're bonus modules, but those bonus modules run from, I think, about 20 minutes to almost 60 minutes. So there's 7. That's a lot of stuff that you will not see in other courses. I know there's some other GLP bonus content available in other AAC courses, but this is deeper. It's a deeper dive.
I know a lot of people were asking me, like, well, why isn't this part of your original course? You guys, my original course is 25 hours. There's no way we could have added 10 more hours onto that course. This had to be like a standalone, separate course. Plus, I really think everyone's freaked out by how long it is. So I want to emphasize, whatever course you decide to take, one or both, you have lifetime access. You can log in and out anytime you want, any time of day. It's pre-recorded. It is self-paced. So a lot of people have even shared with me, you know, I had a lot of just stage 1 or stage 2 gestalt language processors. And then, oh my gosh, somebody's in stage 3 and 4 now. I went back and watched those modules. So that's kind of the beauty of it. You go back in and out anytime you want. You access the handouts anytime you want, share them with parents and families. And circling back to what you said earlier, Laura and Katie Arnold created the majority of the handouts for the course. They are amazing, you guys. When I went and looked at them to edit them, I'm like, they really did such a good job on these handouts. And it's all things you've all been asking for. You know, what are we going to hand to a parent? What is the intake going to look like? How do I program stage 1 gestalts? What happens when they're mitigating? We walk you through all of that.
And like, I kind of get that from a speech standpoint. So even though right now my role is mostly as a facilitator, I still work at a pediatric hospital. I'm on the ground. Like, I know what you need and what you don't need. And I wanted to make this practical. Like, I didn't want you guys to have a lot of fluff. I wanted to be like, okay, what do you need? Like, let's get to it. And what I think is going to be the most helpful tool for you in that moment.
Yeah. And somebody asked earlier, as an SLP and a parent, I'm going to say as a parent too, do you need an AAC background to take this course? And I said, no. I mean, everything we create is for, I just say it's for anybody. If you're a person, we've created it for you. So if you're a parent or an SLP or a related professional, you don't need background experience. Laura's going to help you understand that through the AAC overview. Then we get into gestalt development. Then we're going to get into what you're actually assessing and doing in therapy.
And that's why we added the first 2 courses. We knew it would be review for some people, but if you're like me, you will go to those review courses and still learn something new because you'll have a different perspective. And you can always, I would say, you can always take at least one thing away from something. And so we knew that some people would come in, and we didn't want people to have to take the original course if they felt like they just needed the AAC supports and the background there. So we tried to really make it as universal as we possibly could.
And somebody just asked, I have to address this. It caught my eye in the chat. Is there a place to ask questions while you're taking the course? Yes. So the original course comes with a members forum, which I swear not enough people take advantage of for the amount of people that are in the course. Like, you all need to get in that members forum. Katie Arnold is our moderator in that members forum. She's on there multiple hours every day. And that is your place to ask questions, post language samples. So we wanted to create the same thing for the AAC GLP course. And Laura, with all her other roles, is unable to be the moderator, but we're going to have Emily Diaz as the moderator, which is amazing. So she's going to be in there every day answering your AAC GLP questions, discussion, language samples, anything, and that comes with the course.
Yep. And you can tag people too. So I know Katie has tagged like Emily and I on a few of the original ones. So that's the nice thing, is that we can pull in. So if there's a pod related question that's specific, we can tag on Kate McLaughlin, who wrote that course. Like, we can try to get you the resources and the expert or the one who might have the question, the answer to your question.
Yeah, and shout out Katie Arnold. People are commenting on the chat about how awesome you are. We agree.
Love her.
It just, the only thing that's not awesome is Katie is a military spouse in Hawaii, and we're often like, because of the time difference. But Katie is on there. She will get back to you. A lot of people are like, I haven't heard back. Okay, Katie's like probably 5 or 6 hours behind you, but you will get an answer in 24 hours. Okay, so let's get through to, the rest of our questions here, Laura. So a few have popped up in the chat, and this was something we were going to address, but how do we program or customize devices for Gestalt language processors, and how are we exactly going to cover this?
Well, so the first thing we have to talk about is, how do we determine what stage they're in? And so again, that comes back to looking at language samples, and if they have those language samples that they can give us, if that's applicable, and looking at those unaided communication samples and seeing how are they using language or using their communication. So if we're starting with someone, most of the time this comes up, we're starting with someone who would be in a very emergent Gestalt language, on their Gestalt language development journey. And so those customizations are going to be dependent on the language organization. And so that's why we had to create those bonus modules and really give examples that were applicable to the AAC design itself, because we are not just going to create a page from scratch and make that their homepage and say, and go. Because what we know about AAC software design is that all of that wonderful, robust language that was created, all those core words, all of the homepage, all of the color coding and the syntax building and all of that good stuff is going to be amazingly helpful when they hit stage 3 and beyond. They need access to that. So when we think about customizations, we are not going to program over that. We are not going to delete it. We are not going to change it. So I know some therapists, well-meaning therapists, have tried to kind of change that homepage and start them with more mitigable Gestalt starters like let's and I'm instead of I and whatnot. And so that can be detrimental in the long term if you're playing the long game, because then you've lost that systematic template for later, more flexible language. So instead, we're going to look at how the language is organized. We're going to consider how they're using language. And if they have some spoken language, what does that Gestalt look like? What does it mean? Because we're not going to take Gestalts literally. We're going to think about what it means and where it might fit and where it would best be associated based off of the app design. So for example, if we are saying When you feel so mad that you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4. Any toddler moms out there right now know what I'm talking about. Daniel Tigers is a commonly attributed gestalt associated. It's also just really great in general for feelings, but that might be used if we're feeling upset, frustrated, anxious. So based off of that determination of what it means for that AAC user, we may, if it means I'm feeling upset, we may put it under that feelings page. But if it's something on, let's say, Snap, and it's more environmental or activity based, that may go under maybe a transition page. Or if it only occurs when I have to leave mom, then maybe that's under a topic page about family. You really have to hone it in on, well, what do we think it means for that individual? What does the language organization and software look like? And how we can support it. Then we have to think about motor planning. We have to think about the audio source. We have to think about all of these things, which is why, in a nutshell, we had to have a whole entire course about it, because there's so many factors and considerations as we move forward from stage 1 to later stages of Gestalt language development.
Laura, just real quick, this is like a burning question in so many minds all the time. Are we going to address AAC and IEP goals?
We are. So we are. So there is an entire handout that looks at AAC goals that can be generated for IEPs. So it won't have all of the IEP additions that you need, but the goals will be there so you can make them IEP friendly. There will also be 2 sample language reports. One, if you write funding reports, you know that they are very specific and they like to deny whenever they possibly can. Depending upon your state, you probably have a running bet on how long it can take you to get a device approved. But there's one report for that, knowing that there's medical jargon and that there's criteria that needs to be met. And then there's an additional one with neuroaffirming language that we would want if we were not trying to get a report funded. And so hopefully that those merge one day and we won't need both, but both those sample reports are in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know when Laura first presented me with the funding report, I said, but this is not neurodiversity affirming. So we are kind of in that place where people that are funding the device don't understand ND affirming language and might deny the device. So we've kind of put that all over the sample report, but you will have access to both of those, and that will kind of help you when you're looking at your own client or student assessments. Just taking a quick look. Laura, do you want to just address this real quick? It says, do you put an actual non-literal gestalt on a device, like the Daniel Tiger example?
So yes, because even though it's not literal, it's still a meaningful unit for that child. So it's their language. So we would want to add any unit or gestalt to their system because it's meaningful for them. That's how we acknowledge, that's how we shape, that's how we support them in understanding that this is their voice and that they can use it in other forms. So we want to honor that. So we would put that on the device, and then we would, what I'm encouraging you to do is also consider where you put it. If you put them all on one page, it's not necessarily wrong, but you also then have to navigate. If you're trying to shape it, you honor it, you acknowledge it, and then you're going to have to navigate a way to maybe model what you think that means for them. And so motor planning, dyspraxia, all of those things play a role. If you can lean in to the language organization, you're going to have more supports for helping them associate what that non-literal gestalt is going to mean for someone who is an unfamiliar communication partner. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Anything to add, Alex?
You know, there's another question here that I think can piggyback off of it. So someone is asking, okay, well, if we're putting whole gestalts in this device, where do single words come in? Is that helpful for gestalt language processors that are at the beginning stage? And if I were to answer this, Not being an AAC specialist, I would say no. But now that I know what I know about AAC, I'm going to say don't get rid of those single words, though. Can you expand on that, Laura?
Yeah, so this goes back to the idea that the single word units are very difficult in an AAC system to string together for the same intonation pattern that you're going to see from spoken words. So, and we know, and I go way into this in the course, but we know that rate is different. We know that synthesized speech is not as rich as spoken intonation. And so when we think about stringing together single words on a device, it changes the sound stream. It also can be incredibly difficult for the segmentation piece for our communication partners that are just getting started to model at a rate where that individual is able to process that language cohesively. It can be done if you're a good, fluid, you know the system well, you can model the original location of those words together for a gestalt. It also depends on the gestalt itself. So something like I see you on certain systems would be very fast to model on a home page or a core page, right? Something like I'm going to the park today, not so fast, right? And if that's meaningful, or if we think that that's something that's an intended gestalt that they might benefit from, likely in those early stages, it's going to be more beneficial to have that a layer deep or somewhere where they can at most have to segment out the beginning or the subject phrase to the end of the phrase. And that again goes back to motor planning and what they can handle. That's an individual consideration, which we have a flow sheet for as part of the handout package in the course. I'm not very good at selling things, but I do think those handouts are so helpful because there's so many individual considerations when we're looking at AAC design and customizations. And so those are a few. Do they need the original intonation source? If they do, you're likely going to be putting that in a single symbol or icon early on. And then the motor planning piece, and then what stage they're on, those all play a factor. I think also too, I saw this pop up in the chat, Alex, so I wanted to kind of go back to the idea of high tech and light tech.
Yes.
So one of the things too, we're really thinking about, it is about the individual, the AAC user themselves, but especially early on, we know in the AAC realm that stakeholders and communication partners have to be a primary focus to help them learn, and the AAC device is only as good as the support behind it from those stakeholders. So when we talk about whether it's high tech or light tech AAC, we're in those early stages, we're really kind of honing in on the communication partner supports. So when you ask about light tech, yes, it has a role. We have two different light tech books that are included in the course, one for stage 1 and one for stage 2. The supports, though, are included to kind of get the communication partners started and to give them ideas of what does mitigable gestalts look like? How do we use them across a variety of different functions of language, right? How are we using them for protesting? Are we using them for sharing joy, transitions? And then there's a large spot for personal phrases and gestalts early on, because one of the things, and this is a little bit of a misnomer, and I've heard again several therapists say, is that if we just had a page of gestalts, we could carry them over to all of our GLPs. What I've seen, and I don't know, Alex, what you've seen even with AAC users, but they're still individualized. When they're in stage 1 and stage 2, it's so individualized. So having universal gestalts, or have like we do with core vocabulary and having like fringe topic vocabulary, it's just, I'm not saying it's terrible or it's not good to have in our toolbox, but it's not going to be as meaningful, and they may not be as likely to stick as those individual gestalts. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, and a few questions have actually popped up about this in the chat. I think there's probably a lot of confusion with people that have been doing AAC for a while now. And I will say that what we're presenting and what's in this course is going to require some unlearning, because the majority of information out there right now that's being taught in other courses and on social media, etc., is core words, fringe words, word of the week. And someone here actually posted, okay, is it beneficial to model the single core word? For example, if the gestalt is, I'm going to the park today, would you model go or not, since it's not meaningful to them as a single word? So no, we're not going to model go by itself. It isn't meaningful to a stage 1 GLP as a single word. I want to emphasize here that if you are a stage 1 Gestalt language processor, you are focused on intonation. That's why so often it sounds unintelligible. They are focused on the sound stream. They are not focused on each individual word. So unfortunately, what we've been doing all these years, not knowing, so that's why I always say, you know, we're well-meaning parents and speech pathologists. What we've been doing is trying to get these kids to focus on single words. And Gestalt language processors will take and absorb any language that you give them. So if I'm spending all day modeling core words, they will take that, but they will take that in as a gestalt. So that's what we say when kids are stuck with single words. To them, it could be a single word or a 14-word utterance. It doesn't matter. It's intonationally defined. It's tied to a larger meaning. It's tied to a meaningful or dramatic experience for them. It is a gestalt. So again, back to, we have to do some unlearning. We're not going to take core words off the device, because when a kid is at stage 3, we need them. We need the device to grow with them. But what we are going to do is tweak or tailor the device for those stage 1 or 2 GLPs.
One thing I'll add to that is that it's critical, that acknowledgement piece is critical at this stage. So if you use you use aided language input and you model the full gestalt, but then you show them a single word on the device, and then if they are able to duplicate the entire gestalt later, then okay, that's great. But if they're only able to duplicate go, and you're not in that room to understand that go means something larger, someone else is going to say, oh yeah, go. And so now we've lost that acknowledgement piece that we know is so crucial for them to be able to move into later stages. So that's another reason just to kind of think about and be very intentional. I know some other people, we're not necessarily saying that you should record all of your audio for a stage 1 AAC GLP. That's not what we're saying. I've used many synthesize, like the recording, the speech that's built into AAC systems. Not all kids or individuals need that, but the majority of them are showing that they do need us to consider not stringing single words together, that they need that in a unified icon so that the prosody, the intonation, it's all together as one cohesive unit, like Alex is talking about.
I want to address like a few other things that came up in the chat real quick and kind of lump it all together. Do we show videos of kids in different stages? We sure do. I think that's one thing that hopefully you all know about us as Meaningful Speech. I am all about showing real life examples of things. So there will be plenty of that in the course. Sorry, I missed another one here that I was just gonna tag on to that one. So people are asking a lot of questions about what kind of gestalts to actually program in the device. If you have a minimally speaking child that is like verbalizing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or different songs, and it sounds loud and clear, you still are going to put it in the AAC. Why, Laura? Why do we still want to put very clear vocal gestalts in the AAC?
Because they may not always be easily accessible for that child or individual. And if they're not, they have that, just like we would augment any individual that needs that at different times.
Mm-hmm. So some people here too are asking about intonation, and if GLPs are so into intonation, what if it doesn't match the intonation the child is seeking? Honestly, I think this comes down to experimenting. And I've talked about this with musical gestalt processors. Some of them let me sing and some don't. The ones with perfect pitch want nothing to do with me because I can't sing. And others think it's like great. And then I'm playing around with the intonation with them. I feel like it's the same with AAC. It's not going to matter to some that it's synthesized speech, and to others, it's going to be a big deal. So you are going to actually want to go to super simple songs and get the exact version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But you won't know that unless you're in there with the kid and figuring it out.
And they'll let you know if it's not what they need. I mean, that's the beauty of this process, is that you'll see it register. You'll see that bingo eye contact. You'll see the social connection when it's registering. I just talked to someone today who said it's really important for someone she works with to have that original intonation source, which is Mickey Mouse. And that carries through to new gestalts. Mickey Mouse intonation carries through to anything that he says because it's of value to him. And so that's, for that individual, that's really, really important. One of the examples we show throughout the course is an amazing family who uses Speak for Yourself. They're just amazing in so many ways. And for them, so Speak for Yourself is if you look back at our reel, it's considered good, but it's not necessarily considered best, because you can't do videos, doesn't have whiteboard, there's limited customizations, you can't record audio. But that family uses aided language input whenever they are using the system. And so for him, it works. He's picking everything up and he's moving through the stages. So they're able to see that. I saw somebody say too, that what if we don't know what they want because they're completely non-speaking?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you go back to your unaided communication sampling, and what engaged, when you're getting them engaged, what does that look like? Those are possible gestalts. Are they playing with media clips? Are they rewinding those? Those are possible gestalts. So I've yet to meet an individual that is completely not speaking that I believe is a GLP that I can't find gestalts for. That's all I'll say about that. I mean, there's always something to communicate. You just have to find it. And we have to be good detectives, just like we talk about in the original course, and we have to be really good detectives and figure out what they need to say.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We're kind of coming to time here, so I just want to double check that we have gone through all of the questions we wanted to hit on, Laura, because there's some other good ones popping up in the chat. Do you have anything here that you wanted to address that we had left?
Let's see. I wish I could answer them all. Now you guys know why this is 10 hours.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at how to best take the course, I would say if you're new to this, take it in order. We did systematically program that.
I think quite a few people have been asking about older AAC users. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, so had a conversation today about this. One thing that we don't know, because we need more research on, and we're very clear about that in the course too. So we need more research on this, but one of the concerns is that the older an individual is, and the longer they've been using analytic language processing strategies and these single words and trying to build from the ground up, is the more likely that they have a lot of single word gestalts. And so when you have single word gestalts, as Marge Plonk talks about, you don't have anywhere to go because they're already here. You can't break them apart. And so that can be very difficult to try to offer new gestalts and have those be mitigable. So we do have a student, or we have a gestalt language processor who uses AAC that we talk about throughout the course, who did have significant regression that his mom feels like is because he was exposed to a lot of, again, well-meaning AAC principles that were all surrounded by analytic language processing strategies. So now that they've been using gestalt language processing strategies, I think they're at maybe 3 years now. I'd have to go back to the numbers and the dates, but I know over 2 years that languages are starting to reemerge. But I would say it's never too late to start. It's never too late to give them the strategies that they need to be supported. And I think it goes back to, do they already have an AAC system? Again, I just was talking to someone today who started working with a 19-year-old, never had AAC in her life. And within 5 months, she was on a 45 cell array and was starting to explore and using some words meaningfully. So I just think that it's never too late. We do talk about it in the course, and anything that you hear about those strategies in the course can be applied. We go into a little bit of supports and how that can be supported in the academic setting, and kind of shifting how we think about what we know to be good principles and strategies in the academic setting, how we can be supportive of GLP. So we touch on a little bit of it. I know that there's areas we could dive into further and think about, but I think we try to make everything as universally applicable as possible.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the original course too, because so often people are like, oh, I work with a 21-year-old, or why don't you show any kids that are in high school? So I've tried to address this multiple times, but first of all, not everybody wants their child to be part of a course or to be shown on social media. So the people that were allowed to show are more limited. Like in my original course, the oldest child I show is up to 10. However, I emphasize that what I am teaching and what Laura's teaching in this course really applies to any age. And once you start digging into Gestalt language development, you'll realize that. Like, there are 21-year-olds that aren't in stage 1. So what we are teaching applies to them as well. I just wanted to switch gears. We have a lot of questions asking about, like, what comes with the course? Do you get a certificate? Can you be on the NLA registry, which is our meaningfulspeechregistry.com? So all of this information can be found on our website. It's meaningfulspeech.com. Click on the AAC course. You'll see the whole breakdown, everything that you get with the course. It's structured really similarly to the original course. Another question that keeps coming up is bilingualism. So I have a post I did on Instagram where I share everything that we know about bilingualism and Gestalt language development. There's no research on this. So basically the bottom line is, I say we should follow the research that's out there about bilingualism and speech and language disorders / difficulties, even though probably none of that was on GLPs. We're just kind of looking at best practices. And so if you're curious about that, you can go on Instagram and find that post. Laura, do you have anything to say about that in regards to AAC?
I'll just say that in the course, when we talk about the AAC, when we're going through different robust AAC systems and the supports that they offer, I do talk about what languages are available. And so many of those systems allow you to toggle between languages or have multiple page sets available that you could link. So for bilingual users, those are really good options.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap things up. I know there have been quite a few other questions in the chat that we didn't get to, but if you're part of either course, feel free to post those questions in the member community forum. And then this live Q&A will be posted on our YouTube channel, which you can just go to YouTube and type in Meaningful Speech and you can find it. And the previous one that was in November is already on there. So you might want to go back and watch that if your questions didn't get answered. There will be an email going out at midnight Central Standard Time for the opening of the course. It will be $50 off with the code AAC50. I have quite a few emails going out about this because the course will be on sale for the first 2 weeks of the launch. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Laura, do you have any final words?
Just thank you. I really hope you guys enjoy the course and use the forum. And we just really wanted to support you guys in answering the questions when you're on the boots in the ground running, and supporting you if you're a parent and a family. Just know that you are the eyes and the ears and the best support they have. So keep on your journey.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.